What's up, peeps? Welcome to Copper Cactus DIY. I'm Jen, and in today's video, I am sharing 3 of my favorite dresser makeovers with faux wood grain. You're gonna learn how to do cherry wood, hickory, and walnut, so stick around because I'm getting started right now. This client piece was a sizable project, not just in the size of the dresser, a 6-drawer, but also with the prep work involved. After removing the hardware, I had to give the piece a good cleaning to avoid grinding any dust or dirt into the wood later when I was sanding. I also had to make some repairs. First, I removed the metal feet and saved them to reuse later because they were in great shape. Then I filled cracks with wood glue using a syringe to get into those smaller spaces. I used clamps to make sure it dried in place. Parchment paper helped to avoid any glue squeeze out from attaching to the clamp. Next up came the long and dusty task of sanding every square and round inch of this dresser's cherry wood surface, though I did scrape a layer first. On top, I used a random orbital sander and multiple sanding sheets, moving slow and graduating the grits to avoid swirl marks. But the edges all needed hand sanding, which took a while. And the inside of the drawers also begged for a freshening up, so I used my mouse sander. That way I could get into the corners and right up to the edges of the drawer base. The old polycoat and, in this drawer, this blue ink sanded off with no problem. This was the only drawer like that. But I still did all 6. I had to reshape an entire corner of one of the drawers. I used a less hard wood so I could sand it by hand and shape it to fit. I toned this later before staining. Then I started my stain. The product I used is a proprietary pigment stain with a built-in sealant. This is used in the faux finishing world to create stunning wood grain effects. In this case, however, the material was a gorgeous cherry wood and it just needed freshening up, which this stain also does beautifully. I thinned the stain with water as well as glaze depending on which coat I was doing, and I used various tools to apply it along the grain of the wood. I applied multiple coats of the same stain color and I dried for 24 hours between each coat. To achieve the stain color and grain depth that I wanted, I used wet stain applicator pads, as well as sponges, sponge brushes, floppy bristled brushes, and even more to apply my 3 total coats. I pulled tape and off camera, I added a coat of feed and wax to all of the solid wood inside the dresser frame, such as the frame itself and the drawer rails. And speaking of drawers, I also added a coat of Howard feed and wax to the inside and underside and outside of all the drawer boxes. With all my work done and the stain cured for a week or so, I could finally add the new hardware. Goodbye, bat wings. Hello, modern take on traditional. When the client came to pick this up, he was more than thrilled with the final results, and that made me a very happy painter. I'll share final beauty shots in just a few minutes. To create a realistic looking hickory grain requires a few tools, a great base paint, multiple coats of graining glaze, and most importantly, patience. As always, my first step was to remove hardware, then clean. I did this finish a long time ago and couldn't wait to start living our cave life dreams by covering it up. For those who don't know, we dubbed our old Phoenix bedroom the cave because everything was so dark and wonderful for sleeping. After cleaning with soap and water, I wiped off the residue. Every surface of these dressers were flat, which really helped with sanding. They're made from thermofoil wrapped particle board, which also has a few layers of homemade chalk paint and dead flat varnish on top to scuff sand. That way, the paint will have a tooth for my next coat of paint. I used a 180 grit and a random orbital sander to do it. After I wiped the dust, I left them to dry, then I could finally get to painting. I taped off beneath the chunky tops of both of these dressers. To give a warmer undertone for this hickory, I used a light peach-toned, self-leveling bonding paint, and I applied that with a brush. I pulled tape as soon as I finished painting. This only needed one coat. For the dresser boxes and drawer fronts, I rolled and/or brushed on 3 coats of a custom tinted latex paint by Benjamin Moore. I am not worried about ever stripping this paint back because the piece is particle board, so latex is a fine choice in this application. It went on smooth and I had no issues. Then I started my graining layers on top. Hickory is super cool because it can take on numerous tones, striations, or graining patterns in the wood. Every tree is different, but they do share some common things like heavy graining, knots, the tones that come up, etc. I used multiple types of brushes, and I ran grain marks the width of each top. I filled up the surface, but I left some of the base color still visible in various little tiny spots. Then I added my toning glaze. This will tone any colors beneath it. I mixed universal tint into glaze and I used a foam brush to apply it. Once I had a wide enough application, I ran a wallpaper brush across the surface with the grain that I established to create additional graining marks. Then I left it to dry. I added 2 coats of different finishes of top coat to this. First, I used a water-based satin finish, heavy-bodied top coat, which I flooded on and left to dry fully. That will help to set down all the glaze layers and keep it fully protected so that I could get my desired sheen when I used a water-based dead flat varnish on top of that. Wait until you see how this came out in all of the aftershots. Coming up in just a minute. As a faux finish artist, I love recreating walnut wood grain with faux, and I especially love to give that high-end look to maybe not as high-end a wood piece, like this pine dresser, for instance. This belongs to Mr. CC and I wanted it to feel more special than a simple pine box. I removed hardware so I could prep the piece. Then I taped or used plastic so I can mask off where I don't want paint or faux. I scuff sanded, vacuumed the dust, and wiped everything down with a wet rag. For my final prep step, I added a coat of liquid shellac to the surface. This will help to reduce tannins from bleeding through my finish. I prefer shellac in a spray can, but my garage was out of commission at this time, and I definitely didn't want to spray inside the house. I opened every window and door around me, and I ventilated for a long time after I finished up. This tiny chip brush slowed down the process of putting the shellac on, but it definitely ensured that I got complete coverage. For the box of the dresser and the bottom 3 drawer fronts, I used a deep green latex paint. Spoiler, latex is a fine choice for furniture, especially if you A, don't plan to remove the finish, or B, plan to remove it and add a barrier coat like shellac. This piece falls in both categories, so I forged ahead, not caring what the haters have to say about poor old misunderstood latex. This needed 3 coats. I coated the top and top drawer in a custom mixed bonding paint that is designed to work with glaze. I started the walnut-inspired wood graining with doing the undergrain, or those darkest layers, those would signify the deepest grains in the wood. And that brings up a good point. To do faux wood means to trust the process. Also, you need to think in layers. Real wood has growth through rings that take on different shades or tones, depending on their climate, and probably a zillion other factors at the time of their growth. That tree then is cut from bottom to top lengthwise, and all of those marks are kind of like smooshed outward. That's wood grain. If you want to achieve the most realistic faux wood, you pretty much have to think like a tree, specifically the tree you're attempting to imitate. I added multiple tones and shades as undergrain layers. I shaded the surface with the base tone that I want to achieve, and I established even more graining patterns here. Not everything will show in all light because my final toning glaze is super dark. Speaking of, that final glaze layer will tone all of the layers beneath it, and it will create basically like a final sandwich of the layers. I don't usually go for grain with this layer, but in this case, I used a 4-inch chip brush to apply the glaze. Like I said, this toning glaze is much darker than I usually go, so I wanted to make sure it still had like natural looking light and dark areas. That attention to detail with faux will make every finish unique, just like real wood. While I reattach hardware, I want to thank you for watching today. Like this video if you enjoyed watching, subscribe for more like this, and don't leave yet because beauty aftershots of all 3 projects are coming up in just a minute. But that's all I've got to share for today, so thanks for watching. Later, peeps!